So, quick show of hands, how many people here have degrees related to AI or are working on degrees currently right now? Hands up. Cool. How many of you have graduated or plan to graduate in the last 5 years with those degrees? How many? Well, all those people with your hands up, you're actually very critical to the success of AI ecosystem here in Toronto. It's all about talent. It's all about people with that expertise. And I'm going to talk a bit about industry academic relationships, which I've been engaged in for over 20 years around the world, and why it's so fundamentally important for Toronto and tapping into the amazing things that happen, not just university, Vector Institute, and other organizations in the academic world for companies to be successful. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the foundation and where we're going to go in the keynote. And it's actually, remember, it's not about technology, it's all about the people. So here we go. So Toronto, the success like, movie stars and musicians, it's not overnight. This has been over 30 years in the development for Toronto to make this happen. We're clearly one of those leaders in the world. We've got more jobs, they said, here in Toronto last year in AI than Silicon Valley, Austin, Texas, New York, and Boston combined. If you, even half of that, even if it's true that only half of it, that's a remarkable number. So very clearly one of the happening places here. We talked to, University of Toronto and the Vector Institute is the cornerstone of that. But also we've got some amazing funding organizations with regards to AI. Canadian Institute for Advanced Research, which helped start the AI funding here for Geoffrey Hinton to come here in 86, 87. But also we've got some amazing partners across Canada in Mila, in Montreal, and Amy. So this connection with the academic community is actually really important as we move forward for us as companies. Why is part of this is that, we need to create a critical mass of people that come together. We in Canada, we're spread out geographically and we don't get this critical mass enough. But for AI, and particularly in Toronto, is that finally the world is coming to our doorstep. That, great researchers come here because there's other great researchers to work here. And proximity matters. The closer you get people working together, the faster ideas exchange. And whatever you do, remember proximity matters. Your reason you're here is to talk to other people and learn. You can do that over the internet, you can do that, Skype or whatever tool you want to use. But face to face, there's nothing like it, especially when you're trying to be creative and bring ideas together. We've got the most diverse city in the world, according to the BBC. Diversity brings more ideas, different ideas, exchange of those ideas, but also understanding of different cultures around the world and the impact of AI on people. And that's going to be fundamental as we move forward in this thing. So the challenge of implementing AI from a corporation standpoint, if we look at the expectation, of using technology on the vertical and, taking the idea from to the marketplace, most technologies, we really want to have this smooth ramp. So the more money we spend, a little bit of money we spend on it from a company, we want to see some return. And the more return we get, the more money we'll spend on it, and we'll get it up this nice curve. That's the ideal situation for companies. Unfortunately, AI is this massive step function that occurs. It requires a huge amount of resources for a company to inject into this new technology, unlike almost any technology in the world. We have to put more people on it, we have to put more compute on it, we may not understand it. Remember, these aren't necessarily technology companies that are adopting AI, they just got lots of data. So how do I manage my data? And that's a big change for this company to do. And the rewards equally could be massive, but the risk as well of failure is that you could fall backwards off this cliff and waste all your money. So the challenge is, then how do we break this up into little tiny packets so that I can make some investments and not have to do it myself as a company, but work with others to break it up into smaller pieces so that if I have failure, I can either park that failure and wait till something happens or look for other solutions or or just say, hey, it's not just ready at this time and just move on. So the goal is, how do we take this big, massive impact from an industry standpoint of AI and break it up into smaller pieces? Well, I'm going to take the graph slightly different, and we'll look at resource investment, idea to marketplace here, and talk about the innovation gap. So if we look at the academic world, which is like leaders in the AI space, amazing stuff going on, and if you've, this as an industry partner, we could never do and understand all of the activity that's going on in the space. CVPR, one of the major conferences in AI, just closed last week, Friday, on the number of paper submissions. There were almost 7,000 papers submitted by researchers around the world for this conference. That's an amazing thing to tap into, that a company, we just can't look at all that stuff. So the academics are looking at that world. How do we tie into the academic world? And they're looking at ideas from a product standpoint that are 5 years ahead. Even if they create a startup company, to actually inject the product into the space is like 5 years away. And that's like a long way for a company. For us as a company side, the more the idea actually can take off, we get this curve where we're willing to invest more into it and move that idea more into the marketplace. So there's this actually really big gap in AI where there's less and less investment being made in the academic world as to take the product to market. And then for us, when we see a great idea from industry and moving in the market, we invest more. And so there's this massive gap. And so the goal is, how do we get these ideas across the marketplace from the academic to industry? And that's the unique partnership. So from our product standpoint, we're looking at ideas from LG, but in general, 1 or 2 years ahead. Like, what can I change my product base now with some new ideas with AI to inject there to change the product base? And maybe it's new customer, a new service, or a new product specifically because of AI, or just changing what we have that's more intelligent and providing the customer with the things they're looking for. And then we talked a bit about academic, which is the discovery side of things, 5 years. So our objective here is, from a standpoint of success, of building these partnerships, is companies need to start looking at this middle ground and building R&D labs in this space, specifically that tie the academic exploration of publish or perish with the company's own goals of profit or perish. And they are incongruent sometimes as you look from long-term into the quarter, what's happening next quarter. And so at LG, we've actually built this fascinating space in the middle of which we're trying to tie both sides. And we call it directed discovery, in the sense that it's directed by the potential idea that we think can flow in there and impact our customers with products and services, but also it's still discovery. We're still doing experimentation. And I think when you're looking for jobs or looking for companies to engage with, you need to understand what you're best at. Are you an academic person and want to work on the academic side? You want pure industry product engineering? Or, as AI tend to want to do, is I still want to do a lot of experimentation. There's still a lot of cool things to be learned and foundational knowledge. And we're building this lab in this space. The job is not just to take, I got a cool data set, I found this cool paper, and apply it to the data set. But actually, what is the fundamental understandings? That's where the unique value of individuals that come in this space is, what are their understandings of the architectures? What are their understandings of learning algorithms? And yeah, we have lots of great tools, but how do we actually implement those architectures in a real world problem? And that you can't find in papers. That's actually understanding the problem of direction and then still exploring what are the opportunities. And directed discovery is sort of this unique space. So we end up spending about 70% of our time in the lab working on our own, working on this directed discovery element. We spend about 15 to 20% of our time working with the product people. So understanding where that direction is, where it's going, but not doing their job. We're doing it in partnership so that we're leading an initiative, and when the time comes, we'll hand that initiative off to the product people. And we'll support them, but we know that they're going to take it forward. And that's using what people are good at the engineers doing what the engineers do great, and what we as lab people do really well. And then on the other side is, how do we tap into the academic world? And whether that's, the University of Toronto or Ryerson, OCAD University for Design, or the Vector Institute, for example, is that hands-on interaction engagement. And we spend the other side of our time with that. And it's amazing when you we have a problem and you go to an academic and said, we've been working on this problem for a couple months, here's what our thoughts are, sit down with them and say, hey, any guidance? And they'll say, you know what, read this paper. And we'll go read the paper, and it's like, that turns on that way. Or they'll say, try this learning architecture. And it's amazing how it so quickly changes what we do by having that engagement with the academic world. But proximity matters. You've got to work together and plan together and be almost in each other's back pocket to move things forward. But you also have to have understanding. And that's why this graph is really important, because product people and engineers on the right-hand side really don't have that fundamental AI understanding, as I said, about architectures and learning algorithms, is they can't talk AI speak to an academic. That's why we have the middle ground of our team, is that they understand that they can sit in a room with an academic person and that ties into this vast space and have that one-on-one conversation where they can talk about particular challenges of hyperparameter optimization and what are the right approaches and not approaches, and use those terminologies, because that happens quickly. If you have somebody on one side that doesn't speak that language, it doesn't cross that barrier. And so that's why it's so important. So we get two flows that happen, is we get this great knowledge and expertise that flow through our lab from the academic side, that we can impact our product faster and get it out there to our customers faster because of this flow. But we also get this other flow backwards, which is the direction. It's saying, this is the direction we're going as a company, and we can provide that back to the academics to help focus their work. And we can also have amazing data sets from industry that we can pass back to the academics. And academics love to work on real data. They create all sorts of artificial data and use artificial data sets, but when you actually get real data, that's where the real progress happens. And so they love working with industry that's got the real data, and we get to do that in this space. So setting the right expectations is really important from an industry in working in this great relationships. We at LG, we've only built our lab here starting in March. We currently have already, as of yesterday, 10 research projects on the go with U of T professors in AI in that short period of time. And every one of those projects is at least a year. Half of them are 3 years long. So we're not looking at the short-term stuff. We're looking at the long-term stuff. And that's what really matters, is particularly from the AI standpoint of machine learning and deep learning, is how are we going to integrate this in the longer term? What are we going to learn? Not machine learning, but what are we going to learn as a corporation of the outcomes that will have longer term impact? So these are the things that we do in engagement. We do, yes, research projects. We do education and training. So we actually have people coming over from Korea, and if you have other companies, bring them from other companies. Bring them here. As I said, proximity matters. And we work directly with our researchers in the academic world, and they do training courses. We have, with U of T, 6 researchers that come in every summer, and they do a training course for 4 months. They have a capstone project that says it's like a mini master's degree, and halfway through, it's reviewed by 3 researchers, myself, and somebody from our parent company, and saying, how are you doing on that research? And then there's a final review at the end, in which their career is dependent upon that success. But they get to elevate their capability and to get exposure to the academic world and that opportunities that they otherwise didn't get. So we, again, from the academic experience, we bring the academic side in. A lot of concept experiments with them, in which we try to say, what if the situation, and give them some direction. And instead of having artificial constraints, what are the real constraints on some of their research projects? Again, finally, we have the business relationships come the other side from all of our product development, our strategic partnerships outside of the companies, and the unique startups. Again, we can't do it alone. No company can do it alone anymore. And so how do you bring other partners, other startup companies? You can reduce your risk by working with those great small companies that have got a great specific idea, that are motivated by success. How do we drive them into this thing as well? And then we project management all of those sides of things. The outcomes are really important. It's about leadership, of working with the academic partners, the corporate partners, the research partners, and our own lab in moving the ideas forward. And outcomes for us, success in this middle ground, is about publish. We do a lot of publishing, and I think it's really important to have researchers in the middle, no matter what company, is to have those publishing capability. Lots of learnings. It's about how do you take the open data stuff and open architectures, put them together, but what are the learnings that come out of it? That's what really matters. How do you apply those learnings specifically to your own problem? Advancing the point of impact. So it's constantly driving it forward. What is the point of impact that we want to do? It's not tomorrow, but it's somewhere in the future. And then sharing. So giving back to the community and always, making our data available to lots of partners and making it available to the academics. So I think that's really important for industry to understand, is that they need to share back into the community and really engage in the ecosystem. So those are, success measures of outcomes. They're not necessarily about raising the profit for next quarter. It's about the longer-term impact. And so we look at this as an innovation space. Don't look at it as, as the partnership is we have this particular lab that's doing this thing. Is we do 6 really important things. Yes, we do R&D. Yes, we do partnerships for our company with other companies in the ecosystem. But training is really important. How do you constantly keep your best people in AI learning and moving forward and not tied down by just deriving to a product aspect or the engineering aspect? How do you constantly increase their capability? And by engaging with academics, you get that great opportunity to happen. We provide a lot of group coordination that are really important, is drawing other parts of your company into, especially for a multinational like ourselves, is we become that hosted space. So we have, by the end of next year, we'll have 15 of our own PhD researchers, some support engineering staff, but we also have 10 engineers coming from Korea working in our lab, and we get those connections that go on. So again, it's not just about working with the academic sides. We'll have probably 15 research projects next year, but how do we get our other partners, our other departments, business units from around the world to come in and work with us closely? So drawing them into and understanding the best practices. They become your champions when you go back to the rest of your business units to say, you know what, Toronto's a really unique space. I really had some great successes there. They become your champions, and you need that communication internally in your company of that success. Incubation, certainly, again, I talked about startups, is large companies need to bring in other small companies, whether you acquire them and draw them in, or whether you do partnerships and do research projects with those small companies. That may come from the academic world, right? There's many students that start their own companies up, and so it's a great opportunity for a large company to support those small ideas. And finally, as I said, proximity matters. The closer you can make it happen, the better. In fact, if you get the academics in the same space as the industry in the same space, amazing things can happen. I built an innovation institution in New Zealand around 2010, and we actually had probably about 15,000 square feet of open space. Literally, there were no pillars in it, and we put industry partners, startups, big companies with academic researchers in 5 areas, high performance computing and AI and wireless technology, and just created this open, basic water cooler system. The closer you can bring people together, the faster ideas will flow. That's really important in successful partnerships. So that's the quick statement of giving you an idea of where these partnerships work. It's all about people. The closer you can bring them together, the faster things will happen. But also understanding what your roles are. That the academics are amazing at what they do, and engineers are amazing at what they do. But how do you provide these linkages? So I wish you all the best success for today, and especially at the career fair this afternoon, and have a great conference. Thank you.